Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is James, continuing on with this Balsa USA Smoothie RC plane kit build. And today I'm going to be putting in the mounting blocks for the Aileron servos. So the Aileron servo is going to go in this bay right here. And that's probably going to be the last major step for construction of the wing. Later on, when I get toward the end of the build, obviously I'll need to put the ailerons on, and those will be shaped and covered with Monokote, but that's not until pretty much toward the end of the build. So this is going to be basically the last step, and I can move on to the fuselage next, which I'm excited about doing because I kind of get tired of doing the same part of the plane, so it's nice to sort of move on to something new. All right, so let's talk about the wing aileron servos. Okay, so interestingly, the original kit build, or the original Smoothie RC plane kit, had the aileron servo, just a single servo mounted in the center of the wing. And that's what's shown on the plans. I don't have the plans here in front of me, but that's what's shown on the plans. But in the instructions, they tell you that, or basically the way they do it now, is to have the servos mounted in the wings, which is nice because now I can, if you have the servos mounted on the wings, I can have flaperons. I can basically have a flap movement along with the aileron movement, which is helpful because these sport planes kind of, they fly kind of fast, and when trying to land, it's nice to have those flaps to help you slow down and get a little bit of lift. So anyhow, here's how the instructions show the mounting of the aileron. Oops, see if I can get it close enough to see it. So it's going to mount on these wood blocks. And then the end result is, in this picture here, this is kind of how they would have you do it. You can kind of see it's got these wood blocks that are going to go kind of inside here, build sort of like a little frame, and then the servo is going to sit down on top of that, and that's how it's going to be mounted. Okay, so let me see if I can get my fingers out of the way. So this is about how it would be sitting on the airplane wing. Now it's going to be, it would be flush and kind of sticking out of the wing like this. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. Lots of planes are built that way, but I don't like the way that looks. I'd like to have the servo a little bit kind of recessed and less visible and kind of a lower profile. So I'm going to do it a little bit different than what the plans and the instructions say. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it like this. If I can get it in here without make it easier to see. I'm going to mount it down sort of inside here like that, sort of recess it, and I'm going to have a piece of plywood like a plate over that to kind of keep it a little bit more concealed and a little bit lower profile, and I'll just like the way that looks a little bit better than the other way. So what I'm going to use as sort of a guide is I have these instructions from, this is a Great Plains Revolver 60, and I have videos of this on my channel. You can kind of look them up. Maybe I'll put a couple links at the end of this video. And this is an ARF, and it's a 60 size, a little bit more powerful and bigger. But you can kind of see here how they have the ailerons mounted, the aileron servos mounted. They have basically a plate, like a piece of plywood with a slot cut in it, and then they put two blocks, and then they mount the servo to that, and that whole thing then is kind of like a little piece, almost like a modular piece that kind of plugs into the wing, and that looks really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of follow this. It should be pretty easy to do. I don't think it's going to be too complicated. So let me actually let me pull that wing out, and we can take a look at that to kind of see what we're talking about. All right, so again, this is a Great Plains Revolver 60. I don't know if it's even available anymore, but here it is. Here's basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this sort of like this little plate and have the servo mounted inside here, and it just has a lower profile. I think it looks a lot nicer. So I'm going to try to make that happen on this plane. And this type of construction, this type of approach for the aileron servos in the wings, I think this is pretty common. So if you've built ARFs, you've probably done something like this before anyhow. I'm just going to try to repeat it here. All right, so the kit comes with this stock right here. This is a hardwood and it also has a balsa wood. It's the same dimension, and that's basically kind of what the original sort of framing of the aileron mounts are going to be. So I'm going to be using that, but I also had to get myself, I had some of this in my stash. This is basically 1/8 inch thick plywood, and that's going to be basically that plate that I'm doing here. And then I didn't have these kind of hardwood blocks, but I did have this piece of, this is actually I don't know where this came from. This was either in some kind of packaging I had somewhere, maybe some furniture or something. But this is actually a pretty nice piece of plywood, and it's thick, and I'm going to use this to create these blocks right here. And I think that's going to work just fine. So it's going to cut some material out of here to make those blocks, and that should work fine for that. And then I think I'm just going to hang this up so I kind of have it as a reference. I'll just put it in front of my face there so I can see it, and we'll go from there. All right, now again, the servo. So I just put 2 blue dots on each of these bays, calling them bays, so I don't get them messed up, and I'll make sure I'm on the right side. I don't want to do this on the opposite side on the top. That would make a pretty big blunder. So I just marked a couple dots just so I know, keep everything kind of oriented right. So the aileron servo is going to go in here, and the wires are going to be fed through these holes, and then I will put a hole in both sides of on either side of the center here, and that's how the wires will then pop out. So they're going to go through this sort of these channels in here. All right, so since this is a modification, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of cut and construct as I go. I'm not going to try to measure everything out and then get it all to fit at one final moment. You know, that helps so I don't make a mistake. I can kind of build it as I go, and find that to be a little bit easier for stuff like this. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut the servo mounting blocks, and the servo mounting blocks are going to sort of set the measurements for me, because I have to make room for the servo mounting blocks, and then I also have to make room for the mounts that go inside the wing itself, and everything has to kind of plug together. So I want to make sure I just do it sort of like one step at a time. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and cut a fresh edge off of here. And that'll be my starting point. I'm just going to go ahead and draw that on there. Cut that. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and use my friend the razor saw and try to cut this as straight as I can. All right, so one thing that I did is after I cut this, because this is plywood and it is laminated, I did hit it with CA around the sides to sort of soak in there, and I just want to help prevent this thing from delaminating. So I just let that sit. I'll let this go ahead and sit for a little while, and then I'll cut my blocks out of this. All right, so I'm going to be using these basic analog servos from Futaba. These are just their S3004s. They're just sort of a very basic servo, relatively inexpensive. And these are about 5/8 of an inch wide. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark a line that's about 3/4 of an inch. Let me find the scale here. And I'll just go ahead and mark 3/4 of an inch. You don't want to do it with that. That'll be one. Right about here. Then I'll mark this off right there. That should give me a little bit of room to work. So yeah, it'll be like that. So then what I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'll cut this off, and then I'll split it in half that way, and that'll give me my 2 blocks that I need. So now I have these two blocks that are going to be like this, if you will, like that. Okay, that's what the servos are going to mount to. And then those will be on the piece of plywood like that. All right, so here we go. I soaked them again with CA. Now, obviously, I could have gone to my local hardware store or hobby shop and bought a piece of hardwood stock that was sort of the right size and just kind of cut it, you know, just kind of cut out the length. But anyhow, I have this material here, save a little bit of money, and these will work just fine. So my next step, I'm going to put these aside for now. Put them right here next to the Wolfman, and I will put. I'm going to go ahead and measure out these two blocks that are going to go. There's going to be a hardwood block here and a hardwood block back here. And those two blocks are going to be what the screws go into to hold the whole assembly down. All right, so on second thought, instead of doing this and putting the wood there now, I think what I need to do is I need to establish the full length of the plywood plate that I need to put on here, because that's going to dictate kind of where these mounting rails go. So I'm just going to start by just kind of putting the blocks on the servo like this. They're going to go kind of like that, right? And so that's that length. And then I'm going to have this stock is going to go like right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and mark that roughly where it goes. And push this a little closer. It's going to eyeball it. Then on this side, I need to do the same thing. There's a little bit of room to work. Because what's going to happen is these blocks are obviously going to be glued onto this plate. So when the plate is cut out, it's got to plug into and attach to these rails. So I need to give a little bit of room on both sides so it can kind of make that kind of fit in there. So I'll go right about there. That's about as much as I need. I like to kind of measure it out and see what I got here. 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit less, but that's okay. Right there. Okay. Okay, so now I can take this and mark it. Right about there. Okay. All right, so that piece is going to go right there. So I'll cut this here. All right, so now I'm going to mark this. This is going to sit like that. If I can do this without messing up, right about there. Okay. I marked my rib also. Okay. Okay, so at this location, I'm about 1 7/8 wide, a little over 1 7/8. And this one over here, a little over 1 7/8, a little bit more, tiny bit more. And that's just because, you know, these ribs, as much as I try, they're not perfect. So I just want to make sure I measure to get it close. So I'm at 1 7/8. So I'm going to go a little bit thicker or wider than 1 7/8, and then I can go ahead and sand it and shape it to fit nicely. So I'm going to go a little bit more. I'm going to go about a 1/16 above 1 7/8, which would be 15/16. Right about there. All right, right about there. So there's the panel that's going to go right there. Okay, so for this piece of wood, I think I'm going to take it off camera and cut this because I don't really have the right setup right here. So I'll take it off camera and I'll cut this piece out and then it'll come back. Okay, so I cut this, I used this hacksaw and it just took some time and I got my block cut, or my plate cut. I'll call it a plate, I guess. And that's going to go right here. And I think I need to trim it a little bit. I'm a little bit wide. That's okay though, because I did that on purpose, so I did have room to work with. So now I'll just go ahead and sand this down and get it to shape, get it to the right shape to fit. And one thing I want to do is I'm going to mark, I'll mark on the bottom and I'll mark what the front is, which is going to be like this. I'll just put an arrow like that. And this way, if there's any difference, sort of this thing is out of true in any way, I'll know kind of what side. I won't get it flipped around, and I'll get the proper fit and it will be consistent. So it's going to go just like that. All right, let me go ahead and shape this and sand it, or sand it and shape it. All right, I think this works now. Let's pop it in just like that. Okay, so my next step is going to be to go ahead and start setting up the servo where it's going to be on the plate and get the location for the mounting rails and for the blocks themselves for the servo. So one thing I'm going to do though, so I can kind of keep track of everything, I know this is the top. I know this is the bottom facing forward. I put that arrow on there. And then I'm also going to draw a little arrow like this, and we'll call that the center. Oops, like that. And that way I know as I mount my servo on here, because I want my servo to be on this side. And again, this is somewhat arbitrary. It doesn't have to be this way. So it's basically going to be like this. I'm going to cut a slot out here, but it's basically going to be like that. And then I'll flip it over and it'll sit in there like that. And it'll be nicely concealed. All right, so now I want to go ahead and glue on the servo mounting blocks, which are these two blocks here. But I need to make sure that they don't get in the way of the mounting rail, which is going to be the mounting rails, which are going to be in the wing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set these aside, and I'm just going to trace onto the inside of the plate here. I'm just going to trace basically where the rails are going to be sitting, just right about here. So one there, and then on this side also. And that'll give me my limits to make sure I don't cross into those areas. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing on the top, because when it comes to installing the screws, I want to make sure I can get them in the right location. I don't want to miss that block, so I want to make sure I kind of know where that is, because these are going to be on top like this, and then I'll put the screws in and I want to be able to see. It'll help me judge better. Okay. All right, so there's my top like that. Okay, so now I know where I'm going to put my servo blocks. I did decide to change my servo orientation. I'm going to actually have it like this. Actually like this in the wing, because this way the wire is just going to be easily just go through one of these holes. I'm going to probably put them through these sets of holes right here, and I think this will be the best location to put it just like that. So okay, now I can go ahead and put the servo mounting blocks on. All right, so I'm just going to put my blocks in here like that. And they're within my red lines. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm just going to put it, the servo takes up most of the room, so I'm going to put it right about there, like that. But it goes right to that edge. I may have to sand this down a little bit when I go to fit it, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, so I'm going to put it right about there, like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully hold the block down and just trace it on here. It goes right to that edge, but I'll get most of it on there like that. Hold the servo down on this side. I'll mark this side. Okay. And what I'll do, let's do this right here. There's that one. And that one. Okay. So those are going to be obviously the locations where I'm going to be putting the servo mounting blocks. All right, so for this I'm going to go ahead and use my 30-minute epoxy. I don't need a whole bunch because it's actually a pretty small area to bond. So I'm just going to put a little bit. I don't want to waste it. And what I may do is I may actually put a little piece of double-sided tape, kind of that foam double-sided tape right here also, because these are all, you know, I realize they're kind of small blocks, and maybe just as a little safety precaution, just put a little bit more in there to help hold it. All right, so I'll do this one over here first. Just gonna put a nice glob on there. All right, let's go ahead and put this on here. Squeeze it down. All right, and do the same thing for this side. Wish there was a way to save epoxy after you mixed it so it doesn't go to waste, but oh well. Push that one down like there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, probably should have done this before. I'm going to go ahead and clamp this down on here carefully. I don't need to push it too hard, but I just want to hold it in place. Just like that. Same on this side. Okay. And it's nice to have those areas marked out, because obviously I can kind of move it and rotate it to fit the right location. All right, so I'm going to set this aside, let it cure, and we'll come back and we'll do the next step. Now, where should I put you? I'll put you right here. All right, so let this cure overnight. Let me go ahead and pop these off of here. And there we go. Now I do have a whole bunch of, kind of overdid it with some of the epoxy. So I'm gonna have to clean this up around here so that the servo fits nicely and that it also kind of fits nicely along the mounting rails. One thing that I did notice, or that I forgot about, was that the servos have these little grommet, sort of like mounting, I guess, grommets that go underneath them like this. So I'm going to have to sort of trim the block down a little bit to compensate for that. So I'll do that off camera, and then I'll come back. All right, so I took a little bit of time to get those blocks to kind of trim them down to the right size. And you can see here I got them pretty good. So this block is now going to go like this inside here. So the next step is going to be to go ahead and mount the rails that the plate's going to attach to. And for that, I'm going to be using, here's my old stock, using this hardwood, which is I think it's a 3/8 by 1/4 inch or something like that. So I need to cut two pieces. I need to cut a piece for up here and a piece for down here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and mark this right here. I'm gonna give myself a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. All right, so that will go like that. Now I got to get the other one down here. So what I'm going to do is this is going to pop on like that. Check my marks. Right about there. All right, so the key to with this is I want these to fit nicely, but I don't want them to spread the ribs apart. I want them to just kind of slide in there, but I don't want to distort the ribs. All right, so those are good like that. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and try to put these in the right location. So I'm going to pop this on top of here, like that, and get it flush with the ribs. All right, so what I did is I made sure the plate was flush up on top with where I want it to be. And now I'm just going to go ahead and mark the rail where it's going to go along the rib. And I'm doing this because I don't want to chance just kind of measuring and making a wrong measurement. I'd rather just go ahead and mark it where I think where it's going to be. In here and down here. Kind of see right there where I marked it on both sides, and the same thing on the inside here. Okay, well for this I'm just going to go ahead and use my 5-minute epoxy. I don't need a whole heck of a bunch. All right, and I marked my front one with a little dot again to kind of keep it oriented correctly. They are slightly different. Oops. Dripping everywhere. I'll slide it right down to my mark. This one's next. Right. All right, so now I'll go ahead and let this cure and come back to it after it cures up, and we'll put the there's a frame that's going to go around here, just basically so that the Monokote or the covering material can attach to it. So basically you build a balsa frame sort of around this assembly.